Chapter 10 of Daniel Boone by John S. C. Abbott. This recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Allison Hester. Chapter 10. British Allies. It was in the autumn of the year 1780 that Daniel Boone with his family returned to Boonesborough. A year before, the legislature of Virginia had recognized essentially what is now Kentucky as one of the counties of Virginia, and had established the town of Boonesborough as its capital. By this act Daniel Boone was named one of the trustees or selectmen. Town lots were ordered to be surveyed, and a very liberal grant of land was conferred upon everyone who would erect a house at least 16 feet square, with either brick, stone, or dirt chimney. For some reason Colonel Boone declined this office. It is probable that he was disgusted by his own experience in the civil courts. There was little danger now of an attack upon Boonesborough by the Indians. There were so many settlements around it that no foe could approach without due warning and without encountering serious opposition. On the 6th of October, Daniel Boone, with his brother Squire, left the fort alone for what would seem to be an exceedingly imprudent excursion, so defenseless, to the Blue Licks. They reached the Licks in safety. While there, they were discovered by a party of Indians, and were fired upon from ambush. Squire Boone was instantly killed and scalped. Daniel, heart-stricken by the loss of his beloved brother, fled like a deer pursued by the whole band, filling the forest with their yells like a pack of hounds. The Indians had a very powerful dog with them, who, with unerring scent, followed closely in the trail of the fugitive. For 3 miles this unequal chase continued. The dog, occasionally embarrassed in his pursuit, would be delayed for a time in regaining the trail. The speed of Boone was such that the foremost of the savages was left far behind. He then, as the dog came bounding on, stopped, took deliberate aim, and shot the brute. Boone was still far from the fort, but he reached it in safety, leaving upon the Indians the impression that he bore a charmed life. He was very deeply afflicted by the death of his brother. Squire was the youngest of the sons, and the tie which bound the brothers together was unusually tender and confidential. They had shared in many perilous adventures, and for months had dwelt entirely alone in the wilderness, far away from any other society. The winter of 1780 was one of the saddest in the annals of our country. The colonial army, everywhere defeated, was in the most deplorable state of destitution and suffering. Our frontiers were most cruelly ravaged by a barbarian foe. To add to all of this, the winter was severely cold, beyond any precedent. The crops had been so destroyed by the enemy that many of the pioneers were compelled to live almost entirely upon the flesh of the buffalo. Virginia, in extending her jurisdiction over her western lands of Kentucky, now, for the sake of a more perfect military organization, divided the extensive region into 3 counties, Fayette, Lincoln, and Jefferson. General Clark was made commander-in-chief of the Kentucky militia. Daniel Boone was commissioned as lieutenant colonel of Lincoln County. The immigration into the state at this time may be inferred from the fact that the Court of Commissioners to examine land titles, at the close of its session of 7 months, had granted 3,000 claims. Its meetings had been held mainly at Boonesborough, and its labors terminated in April, 1780. During the spring 300 barges, loaded with emigrants, were floated down the Ohio to the falls, at what is now Louisville. As we have stated, the winter had been one of the most remarkable on record. From the middle of November to the middle of February, the ground was covered with snow and ice, without a thaw. The severity of the cold was terrible. Nearly all unprotected animals perished. Even bears, buffaloes, wolves, and wild turkeys were found frozen in the woods. The starving wild animals often came near the settlement for food. For 75 years the winter of 1780 was an era to which the old men referred. Though the Indians organized no formidable raids, they were very annoying. No one could safely wander any distance from the forts. In March, 1781, several bands entered Jefferson County, and by lying in ambush, killed 4 of the settlers. Captain Whitaker, with 15 men, went in pursuit of them. He followed their trail to the banks of the Ohio. Supposing they had crossed, he and his party embarked in canoes, boldly to continue the pursuit into the Indian country. They had scarcely pushed a rod from the shore when hideous yells rose from the Indians in ambush, and a deadly fire was opened upon the canoes. 9 of the pioneers were instantly killed or wounded. The savages, having accomplished this feat, fled into the wilderness, where the party, thus weakened in numbers, could not pursue them. A small party of settlers had reared their log huts near the present site of Shelbyville. Squire Boone had been one of the prominent actors in the establishment of this little colony. Alarmed by the menaces of the savages, these few settlers decided to remove to a more secure station on Bear's Creek. On their way they were startled by the war whoop of they knew not how many Indians concealed in ambush, and a storm of bullets fell upon them, killing and wounding many of their number. The miscreants, scarcely waiting for the return fire, fled with yells which resounded through the forest, leaving their victims to the sad task of burying the dead and nursing the wounded. Colonel Floyd collected 25 men to pursue them. The wary Indians, nearly 200 in number, drew them into an ambush and opened upon the party a deadly fire which almost instantly killed half their number. The remainder, with great difficulty, escaped, leaving their dead to be mutilated by the scalping knife of the savage. Almost every day brought tidings of similar disasters. The Indians, emboldened by these successes, seemed to rouse themselves to a new determination to exterminate the whites. The conduct of the British government, in calling such wretches to their alliance in war with the colonies, created the greatest exasperation. Thomas Jefferson gave expression to the public sentiment in the Declaration of Independence, in which he says, in arraignment of King George III., "He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions." There were 2 wretched men, official agents of the British government, who were more savage than the savages themselves. One of them, a vagabond named Simon Girty, had joined the Indians by adoption. He had not only acquired their habits, but had become their leader in the most awful scenes of ferocity. He was a Tory, and as such was the bitterest foe of the colonists, who were struggling for independence. The other, Colonel McGee, with a little more respectability of character, was equally fiend-like in exciting the Indians to the most revolting barbarities. Thus incited and sustained by British authority, the Indians kept all the settlers in Kentucky in constant alarm. Instigated by the authorities at Detroit, the warriors of 5 tribes assembled at Old Chillicothe to organize the most formidable expedition which had as yet invaded Kentucky. These tribes were the Shawnees on the Little Miami, the Cherokees on the Tennessee, the Wyandots on the Sandusky, the Tawas on the Maumee, and the Delawares on the Muskingum. Their choicest warriors, 500 in number, rendezvoused at Old Chillicothe. This Indian village was built in the form of a square, enclosing a large area. Some of their houses were of logs, some of bark, some of reeds filled in with clay. Boone says that the Indians concentrated their utmost force and vengeance upon this expedition, hoping to destroy the settlements and depopulate the country at a single blow. Not far from Boonesborough, in the same valley of Kentucky, there was a small settlement called Bryant's Station. William Bryant, the founder, had married a sister of Colonel Boone. On the 15th of August, a war party of 500 Indians and Canadians, under the leadership of Simon Girty, appeared before this little cluster of log huts, each of which was of course bullet-proof. The settlers fought heroically. Girty was wounded, and 30 of his band were killed, while the garrison lost but 4. The assailing party, thus disappointed in their expectation of carrying the place by storm, and fearing the arrival of